Um, we're here today with Jean Marie from NYCI and with Dean, who's been involved with Young Voices. And they're just going to chat to us a little bit about Key Action 3 and the Youth Dialogue project, and also the European Youth Goals and what those goals mean to them. And hopefully their experiences will be a source of inspiration to you guys to get involved in your own projects with your young people. So yeah, hi Jean Marie, hi Dean. Thanks a million for taking the time today.
No problem.
Hopefully everyone is doing well in lockdown still.
Relatively sane.
Yes, exactly, like all of us, I think. So Jean Marie, maybe you can just talk a little bit about NYCI's involvement in the Youth Dialogue Key Action 3 projects over the last couple of years, and how you found the process, I suppose, and what it's brought to your organisation, but also to your young people.
Yeah, well, we use the Key Action 3 to get young people involved in the EU Youth Dialogue process. And the actual process of applying, I found Léargas really helpful and really supportive. And we've managed to create lots of events and lots of focus groups and really engage young people in the EU Youth Dialogue using the KA3 funding from Léargas. The EU Youth Dialogue is the flagship participation methodology that European Union uses to engage young people and bring young people together with policymakers. And in Ireland, we have the Young Voices project, which delivers on that EU Youth Dialogue process in Ireland. And we use the funding to ensure that young people have an opportunity to participate and influence policy that affects them. So really it's all about youth participation and young people having the opportunity to become change makers. And we really want to encourage youth workers and have been very successful with encouraging youth workers to get involved in the process and get their young people involved and look at their role in facilitating the young people they work with to become change makers and shape the society that they're living in.
And what do you think has been the biggest impact on the young people that you work with? And Dean, you can speak to that as well, maybe in a minute. The impact, I suppose, that participation in projects like this has on the young people that you work with.
Yeah. Well, we actually have a great animation on youth.ie/young voices. If you want to check out that the young people themselves they recorded the impact that they felt that being involved in the KA3 project, Young Voices, had on their lives and for them. And I think the one thing that stands out a lot, and I know Dean was involved in that animation as well, it was the diversity of voices and making sure that the young people that weren't necessarily in the room had a voice too, and how Young Voices could support young people from lots of different backgrounds and diverse voices and really focus on inclusion. I think that's what they highlighted the most, that they through this project got an opportunity to hear the stories of young people that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet. And I think it's really important that that's at the centre of all KA3 projects, that it's around that diverse voice and making sure that young people from all different backgrounds have the opportunity to be change makers and influence policy makers.
And that's really interesting, because obviously that's a big priority under Erasmus Plus as well, that priority of inclusion and making sure that young people of all different backgrounds, etc., needs and so on, have the opportunity to take part in these kinds of projects. And I think Young Voices has been a really good example of that, and how you've built that over the years as well, you know, of young people of different needs and backgrounds being able to take part in the consultations, both like the bigger consultations, but also the smaller kind of working groups that you've set up with young people.
And that's another impact they talk about, is that through the project and through working with their youth workers as well, that they knew they had a voice, and they want to have that voice heard, and they want to make a difference. And the impact for them is that they feel confident enough to go out on by themselves as well, and make that difference. And that they, once given the opportunity, they can run with it. Then they don't necessarily need us or our youth workers. And there's also opportunities then through Erasmus Plus funding for young people to create their own projects and run with that.
And what would you say to organizations that are maybe, thinking about getting involved in these types of projects? But obviously NYCI works at a very national and European level, but there are a lot of organizations out there and a lot of projects that might work at a much more local level and maybe feel like they don't have, the capacity or the experience to be involved in these types of projects. So what would be kind of your words of advice and words of wisdom from your experience when it comes to those organizations?
Well, I have talked to youth workers that that have been in that situation, or maybe they felt that they didn't have the capacity, but also they may be worried about whether the young people that they were working with would be interested, or would they feel confident enough to talk about policy and trying to shape society. Would that make, would they may feel maybe intimidated by the whole concept or process? And a lot of youth workers have come back and said that they really shouldn't have ever worried about that, that being an issue, that they really, in a lot of cases, have underestimated how young people, given the opportunity, will embrace it and are happy to engage in projects such as Young Voices, or do their own projects. And that's another piece of advice that I would have for youth organisations or youth workers. If daunted by the prospect of the application and filling it out, and what policies and what policy makers and what would we influence and how would we go about it, there is support there from Léargas and also from myself, and others in the National Youth Council. And it's also possible to join the local piece of work that you're doing through a KA3 with our national piece of work at the Young Voices project at a national level, and therefore bringing it to a European level very easily, without necessarily having to start from scratch. So you can do something quite local that's very important to the young people that you're working with, and then link it in by contacting myself in the National Youth Council, linking it in with the Young Voices project that we have at a national and European level.
That's great. And I know that you guys have done that in the past as well, and it's been really successful, particularly for organizations maybe that are just starting off with European projects or who've never been involved in these kind of like Key Action 3 projects before, so that they can really do a project on quite a small scale. But then by linking in with you, it gives them the opportunity to bring those issues up to a national or to even a European level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've had young people then that would take their European or their local issue to a European policymaker. We also link in at a national level with the policymakers, the Children and Young People's Policy Consortium. There's amazing opportunities that have been provided through this process at both the European and the national level. And it sounds very far away and difficult to engage with, but actually it's through the Erasmus Plus funding, it actually makes it quite possible. I don't want to overpromise. It's not a a perfect process, but it definitely does give opportunities to young people that that they may not have had at a national and European level. So yes, run with your local project on a local issue that's important to you and the young people you work with, and you can bring it very easily to a national and European level through the EU Youth Dialogue process, the Young Voices project.
Well, I'm sold anyway.
Sorted.
Thanks, Jimmy. Jean, maybe I'll chat to you a little bit now about your experience, because you've obviously been involved. You are one of those young people who's been involved with Young Voices, and I know you've attended the youth conference, and also you were involved with the whole process around the European Youth Goals. So maybe you can just kind of talk a little bit about that, and what was it like, and what would you say to other young people who think that they might like to get involved in something like this?
I think for getting involved, it's just about showing up on the day and not overthinking it, because all the young people and then Jean Marie and Derma are all welcoming in that space. And when you're going to the event, you'll see sort of the same faces showing up. And then when there's new people, they're always welcomed in by the ones who are there longer and know what's sort of happening with Young Voices and how it's structured.
Mm. So you
Then
think
for going, yeah, then for going to the youth conference, it showed the European level and how you can directly influence as young people policy on the wider scale than just the Irish policy. Because in 2018 I was in Bulgaria first, and we developed the EU youth goals, and they focus on different areas of young people's lives. That was issues talked about across Europe in structured dialogue and brought to the youth conferences. So it was stuff from mental health to the environment and living in rural areas. And it was about trying to create a goal that can be achieved across Europe in youth work to better young people's lives. And then in Austria, they were further developed and put into the EU youth strategy in the appendix of it. But while in Austria there was 3 of us from NYCI there, and Minister Catherine Sapone was attending to represent Ireland, and we were talking to the minister at the conference and flew home with her, and were invited to the Dáil then to speak with the minister about how Ireland could look at implementing the youth goals and what impact we thought it'd have if achieved in Ireland.
That's such a great example of policymakers and young people working together, and young people really being taken seriously in those spaces, I think, you know. And I mean, what was it like for you, I suppose, like in terms of, you know, you were saying that you were, you know, the goals were developed and you were there with young people from all across Europe. And does that kind of make you feel more connected to the EU or to other young people across Europe?
It showed that the issues aren't only in Ireland with mental health and stuff, and that it's a European issue and even a global issue. And when you have young people at the sort of youth conferences standing together and they have one voice on an issue, it shows that a sense of solidarity with young people can influence policy on national and international levels.
Definitely. And do you think that the youth goals and that the process was taken seriously by policymakers in Ireland?
I think a lot of them are buying into it, especially when we had staff from the Department of Children and Youth Affairs coming to some of the Young Voices events and talking to us as young people about what we thought of different policies and stuff that they were looking at implementing or that were in development, because they wanted to hear what young people thought about them.
It's great. Jean-Marie, sorry, were you going to say something there a second ago?
Yeah, just that's the important thing about youth participation isn't necessarily changing the young person, but more changing the attitudes and behaviors of the policymakers, and they're ultimately the policy, and bringing about positive change. But a part of that, the work that you can do with your KA3 and that we do with Young Voices is also supporting the young people, maybe to encourage the skills and competencies around. For instance, we do a youth facilitation training, and so there's a lot of peer-to-peer facilitation within the Young Voices, and also training around like creative advocacy, or working with the young people on building their confidence really around presenting to policymakers around their ideas and things like that. So there's kind of two different levels that you can work at. You can work with the young people on their skills, but also on, as Dean was saying, once they get there to where they do engage with and try to influence policy with politicians, etc., then that they feel that they have the confidence, that they know what they want and they know how to ask for it.
Absolutely. And I mean, how do you feel, Dean, in terms of, your involvement in Young Voices and in that whole process of engaging with policymakers and so on? What did you kind of take away from it, I suppose, for, whatever you're doing now in your studies or for life in general?
It's good to have a voice as a young person, and I'm in college training to be a youth worker. So it's good to bring the policy stuff I learn and advocacy stuff in Young Voices and at the different trainings, and being able to use them practically then as a youth worker, but also know that when working with young people who want to be influencing policy, that there's the whole world of Young Voices that exists that can support them.
And I think that's so true that, oftentimes I think policy seems like such a foreign thing to a lot of people, and they feel like, oh, how is it relevant to me? And, they can't really grasp it, I think, sometimes. And even I think that, like, the youth goals, there's so many different thematic areas covered that, like, most people who are working with young people, there's probably going to be a goal that's particularly relevant to you. And I think that's also the beauty of the goals, that it gives you something really tangible to connect your project to, and then maybe link it back into Young Voices or other policy kind of processes that are happening.
There's been great examples of organisations that have used KA3s and linked them at a national level to the Young Voices, but also that their own KA3s at a national level are starting off local and then it widening out. For example, the Involve organisation, fantastic KA3 around mental health, and also CRC, the Central Remedial Clinic, linked in with the Young Voices process into our KA3, but also then started to do their own KA3s and work with young people with disabilities and engaging them and them having a voice around the issues that are important to them and how policy and the world around them needs to change to so that they can really fully engage. So there's been really inspiring work by young people, and as Dean said, going to EU youth conferences and meeting with politicians and really giving it all to make the world around them a better place.
Thanks so much, guys. You're an inspiration. And I can tell that you're so enthusiastic about the projects and the work of Young Voices and everything else. So, like, I really hope that, people will hear you guys and see these videos and really think about getting involved. And obviously, it's not just the Kitty Action 3 projects either under Erasmus Plus. There's lots of other opportunities, I think, as well to link with policy, even through youth exchanges or through solidarity projects under the European Solidarity Corps. So I'd really encourage people to kind of look at the program and look at the different opportunities that are there. And I know that NYCI always have a really open door policy. So I think if anybody wants to connect in to ask any questions or to look at, the practicalities of getting involved, I'm sure that you guys would be more than welcome to provide any nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, hopefully if we've managed to inspire anybody, please do come and seek support. We're always looking for more youth organisations, youth workers and young people to get involved in the Young Voices EU Youth Dialogue project, and for them to set up their own at a national level as well, or a local level as well.
And Dean, we'll be expecting project applications from you when you finish college and you're out working in youth projects. I hope that's the plan.
Yeah, definitely.
Dean is going to be working on the next Young Voices application for the deadline coming up with the other Young Voices young people, because that's an important part of it as well. Make sure that the young people are involved in the process from the beginning to the end.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks a million for taking the time to chat to me, guys.